Boogie down with reformed Dobble girl Chase Masterson as she takes you inside Discovery every week on the all-new Star Trek podcast, Disco Nights. From the producers of Inglorious Trexperts, wherever you listen to the 430 movie. And keep looking at the stars.
Like movies? You'll love Inglorious Trexperts, the new Star Trek podcast from the creators of the 430 movie. Check it out wherever you listen to podcasts.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are, if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 430 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw before and get reacquainted with some old classics. Now, join us for the 430 movie.
Hello, I'm Mark A. Altman, and welcome to High School Week. Oh, God, we're going back to high school.
I had this dream that we did this podcast and I was naked. What does that mean? Shit, we're on video, so that's nothing good.
Well, there you have it. As usual, we have our expert band of programmers here to curate a great week of classic movies for you. So you don't have to.
The usual gang of idiots, as they used to say on Mad Magazine.
And they include Stephen Melching.
Present.
Daren Dochterman.
Here.
And Ashley E. Miller.
Sphincter says what?
So, guys, I got to ask you, we're going to do high school movies this week, which is going to be fun. What is a high school character that you identify with? Like a character from a high school movie that you most identify with?
Why would we identify with high school characters? When we were in high school, we identified with older characters, and I don't think anyone would want to identify with a high school character.
No, you don't think you had a little Anthony Michael Hall in you from The Breakfast Club?
I certainly hope not.
A little Judd Nelson?
No, actually, no. It's interesting. We'll probably bring up The Breakfast Club later, I'm sure. But I didn't identify with any of those people because I wasn't as geeky as the geeks and I wasn't as cool as the cool kids. I was somewhere in between.
You were a hybrid. You were right down the middle.
I was strange in any group.
You were Spock.
No, I wasn't Spock.
Belonging nowhere. No. Okay. Well.
Anyone else?
What were your cliques in school? What were your interests? I was a band geek.
What are your interests? I was a band geek. I was a speech team geek. I was sometimes drama geek.
I did some drama as well.
But I and sometimes I was a learning geek, But look, I tried to get along in all the sort of various groups, and I think I did to some extent. But I didn't have the sort of pigeonholing that I guess other people did in high school. I sort of was all over the place.
My love of movies was really nurtured in high school because I had an English class where they would show movies on 16 millimeter, and I first saw Citizen Kane and Bonnie and Clyde. Grapes of Wrath, not one of my favorites, but I do love John Ford, and we'd see those in high school. But more so than that, we used to do this thing. They had a thing called Opta, which was basically lunch, or like you would have off. So. And in our school, for security reasons or whatever, the doors were locked, so you weren't allowed to leave school premises.
It was a closed campus.
Well, it was somehow, and I'm not going to belabor the story. I got a hold of the keys. And so me and a friend of mine at the time, he lived across the street. So we would sneak out in the middle of school where he'd just gotten HBO. And his housekeeper would prepare chocolate chip cookies for us. We'd arrive with a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies and watch whatever was on HBO for an hour or two, and then come back. Wow. And I would use the keys to open the school back up, and we would come back in.
That's interesting. Because of my activities with the band, I had to get in and out of various rooms for like the auditorium and things like that. That were normally
was perfect cover for your career as a hitman.
Well, let me just say that I had a key, too, to my high school.
Really?
It was called the 20 key, and it would open anything.
Yeah, me too. I had the master key as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously, we were trusted enough to be given this.
Well, I wasn't given it.
Oh, you weren't?
He acquired it.
But
Tell me more of this
situation. I almost didn't graduate because I had a falling out with a friend, and so they ratted me out to the principal and told the principal that I had the master key, and they weren't going to let me graduate. But the thing was, I'd had this guy as an AP history teacher, the principal, and he thought I was awesome. So he was like, well, this is really disquieting and disturbing and everything, but we're going to let you graduate and just don't let it happen again. Don't let it happen again. I'm graduating.
Yeah.
And so I sort of got away with it, but by the skin of my teeth, I was lucky that he liked me, because I was going to be in for a great deal of trouble for having this master key to school, which of course I never used to break in or do anything terrible. I just used it to go watch HBO, which is where I got to watch a lot of these movies we're going to talk about of the era, on HBO. And if it was a really good movie, we might miss a class or two to finish the movie, and if it was bad, we'd get back in time for math.
That is incredible.
Steve, you and your family were bouncing around all the day. Did you have 4 consecutive years of high school?
Yes, thankfully I did. It worked out that I did all 3 years of junior high or middle school in one place, and all 4 years of high school in one place. Good. It worked out. I was up in the mountains of Colorado for my high school.
Did you have any secret keys?
No, but my teachers, I was such a goody two-shoes that they would kind of let me come and go at will. I had a teacher that said I was doing independent study, and he said, if you want to just go into town and write in the donut shop, go ahead. Just I'm like, okay.
But just
it was
the
a small
donut
town.
Shop.
There was
the seat you should be at is.
It was a phenomenal donut shop called the Donut Mill in Woodland Park, Colorado. It's still there. They make their fresh donuts every day.
The old
He
donut
took
mill
my
fixture.
cookies and raised them by one. Now he has the donuts. I went to Edward R. Murrow, which was obviously named after the great broadcaster and the man who was partially responsible for the end of the Blacklist.
High school, you are there.
It was a it was a communications specialty, so it emphasized film and television, and it was great. It was an absolutely great school. And it definitely introduced me. I mean, I had a filmmaking class, and I remember, at graduation, they gave out a lot of certificates and special awards. At the filmmaking teacher, this guy, Mr. Lackey, I didn't get a freaking certificate. I'm like, what the? It's like, and of course, I'm the only one, other than Daren Dochterman, who's working in the film business. But I was like, what the?
Well, when you get your Emmy, I'm going to dedicate this
to Mr. Lackey.
That's right.
Yeah,
F you, buddy.
Oh my God, he was like Dennis Franz's
the
guy.
Appropriately named Mr. Lackey.
Yeah. I mean, that was when I was in my Brian De Palma movie, and everything on Super 8 I was making was like some Brian De Palma movie. Lots of blood, lots of killing and cool stuff, and really awesome camera angles.
I'm so jealous you got to do that in high school. That's awesome.
Me too.
No, it was. I was lucky. It was a great. I mean, the thing was, it wasn't my zoned high school, so every day I was lucky enough to have either the carpool would drop me off, but I'd take the bus home every day. So it was always a production. But one of the things I would do every Monday when the new issue of Variety came out, I would go to the newsstand and buy Variety and read it on the bus in high school. And
you must have been insufferable.
Wow.
And it was funny because, when the Can issue came out, it was like 500 pages, and it would have all the ads for these terrible movies, most of which were never made. But Canon Films would do like 40 pages, and half of those were made, and half of them were never made. But I remember those issues, and it was just the greatest. It's like, this is why I had such an affinity for print my whole life, and why the web doesn't quite have the same appeal to me. But it was great. It was great.
What about you, Mr. Miller?
So my high school experience was a little different than most. I was in the first graduating class of Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, which is now the #1 public high school in the country.
Wow. Well, check out the big brains on Brad.
I know, right? It was a magnet school
after you
for
left.
super nerds.
After you left.
After I left. Yeah. It
Thomas
was
Jefferson Hooker?
Yeah, totally. We had to basically we displaced the high school that had been there. And the class
that was Alexander Hamilton High School that was displaced by Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, pretty much. It was Aaron Burr High School, really. But I was basically surrounded by Anthony Michael Hall, and that was. I went to the Anthony Michael Hall School of Being fucking Anthony Michael Hall, and everybody was Anthony Michael Hall. And actually, though, I did my area of interest was actually in TV production. We had this great television production facility and all this other shit. Like, yeah, I know.
Oh my
Nice.
god!
Yeah, we had that too.
And I loved all of that stuff. But it was definitely an experience. I met a lot of very interesting people. It was amazing. We actually had a football team. Somehow we did. But it was not, my high school experience was not something that I've ever seen on film. Mine was more like it's like something out of like Dexter's Lab or something.
Well, it's your job to put it on film now.
Well, yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, for me, I think the character I probably most identified with, believe it or not, was Marty McFly, because at least there were a couple of Doc Browns in my life. None of whom
Marty McFly. See, I would say Ferris Bueller.
Right? Well, the truth is, I did a couple of Pharisee things, like
Pharisee
things. There was a Ferris wheel that I remember one day.
George Ferris.
We didn't need a key to escape because there was almost no discipline, because they figured, oh, you're the good kids, you'll be fine. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in class, like history class, and one of my buddies leans over. He says, "Hey, man, you want to go to 7-Eleven and get some Slurpees?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, we can go after school." He's like, No, I mean now. So we get up. Class is happening. We get up. We walk out. We drive to 7-Eleven. We get Slurpees. We come back, Slurpees in hand, go to the principal's office. We go to the principal's office. We go to see the principal's secretary. We ask for hall passes, which she gives us.
While you're holding Slurpees.
While we're holding Slurpees, we go back up to the class. We walk in. Our teacher looks at us. "Do you have a pass?" We hand her our valid hall pass. Why, yes, we do. We sit down with our Slurpees until the end of class.
That's hysterical.
You're lucky your teacher wasn't Ray Walston.
I didn't have that.
She hated my guts.
I didn't have that experience until college. I was literally in this boring-ass Psych 101 class, and I turned, it was freshman year, I didn't know him, turned to the girl next to me, I said, "You want to go see a movie?" And she's like, "When?" I said, "Now." And we got up and we went on the train and we went to see Terror in the Aisles, which was this awful compilation of horror movie things.
Was Gilda Radner in that? No, that's another one.
No, but it had a bunch of hosts.
Right.
And it was just awful. It was just clips from horror movies. Yeah. But it was like the only thing that was like playing, and it was terrible.
I think one of my only interfaces with the principal in my high school came when my school started doing this thing called the Very Important Student, like basically Student of the Month. And I was selected Student of the Month one month, and they put my, they do like a Xerox with a photo of the students that were chosen. And
it's just like painting a target on your forehead.
It's like, just like give you a T-shirt that says "Please kick my ass" on it.
My best friend, Dave McDermott, who is still one of my closest friends in the world, known him since high school, drew a big old mustache, like a big, long, thin, like Salvador Dali handlebar mustache on my picture. And the principal saw it and took it down and found out that it was Dave that did it. And I guess I found out, Dave told me he was getting busted for it, and they called me in. And I so wanted to get a fake mustache and put it on. Walking in. What's the problem?
That's so funny. Well, you know what, Steve? You're still Student of the Month here at the 430 movie, because if anyone does his homework and comes prepared, it is you. And so it's only appropriate that Monday, high school
Monday
movie,
morning,
we got to get up.
Back at school.
And Monday is a brutal day.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
Well, as I was kind of saying, I had a sort of a very quintessential 80s white suburban high school experience. The John Hughes movies might have as well been documentaries about my high school experiences. I was usually the same age as the characters when they came out, whether it's 16 Candles or Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller or even, Back to the Future. I was the same age as these characters. I was going to these same kinds of schools. I knew all those archetypes that were in those films, and perhaps we'll talk about some of them. I was not going to choose any of those for my choice. It was a tough call, though. I wanted to select a movie from 1986 called Lucas.
Oh, so good.
It was directed by
George Lucas.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's directed by David Seltzer, who interestingly had written the Omen films prior to that, but this is like nothing like that. It starred one of the Coreys, Corey Haim, It also starred Charlie Sheen in one of his early film roles. It marked Winona Ryder's film debut. Also had Courtney Thorne-Smith, who went on to do a lot of television. Melrose Place.
Luminous and sumptuous.
It was one of sumptuous.
Indeed, she was.
Oh my gosh, I had such a crush on her. Jeremy Piven was in it, playing a jock. I know that's a stretch.
Typecasting, yeah.
And Carrie Green was the sort of female lead. She was next seen in The Goonies. And it's this wonderful high school, quintessential, well, I just use that word, but, it's a great high school story that I think a lot of people can relate to about this oddball, sort of outcast kid who sees the new girl, Carrie Green, moving into town, is instantly smitten with her.
Right.
Develops a relationship with her, and then realizes that as soon as school starts back up for the fall, the friendship is doomed. That he's going to be, marginalized. She's going to become a popular girl. Right. He really tries to keep up this relationship. He's got this interesting relationship with Charlie Sheen, who's the captain of the football team. He sort of both looks out for him and looks the other way as the other kids bully him, and it's just a really heartwarming, sort of sad story about this kid Lucas, who's desperate to hold on to this romance that he wishes he had with this new girl, and doesn't understand why they can't be more than friends. And it's really, I think it's a place we've all been in at one point in our lives, and it's done, I think, just very very tenderly. It's a great story of first love and embarrassment and bullying and humiliation and all that sort of stuff.
I love that movie, man. It really is a beautiful little film. And I think it perfectly captures that experience, and the experience of being an adolescent who is, caught between childhood and truly young adulthood, like really sort of the worst time in someone's life. It's like, being aware of adult concerns, but only being equipped with the processing capability of a child. Mm-hmm. And everything changes so quickly at that time, and it changes at different rates for different people, and nothing makes sense to anyone. And what I love about Lucas is how it really is this movie about this child who is trying to make sense from senselessness. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Corey Haim is he's awesome in it. Carrie Green is just incredibly charismatic. It's, she's great. She's so well cast.
She's very cute. She's very empathetic towards him.
She never
doesn't
feel
treat him like it's a very mature approach to the material, I think. Like none of the main characters are really one-note archetypes.
That's right.
Even Charlie Sheen as the captain of the football team, he's got his soft side. You see different dimensions to these characters. That I think is wonderful, and it's so hard to watch poor Lucas, who's from a poor family, and he's trying to pretend to be from a wealthy family in order to impress people and not be ashamed or embarrassed, and it's really wonderful.
Well, I have to say, this is the first time in the history of this podcast that someone has mentioned a movie I have not seen.
Wow. Oh my gosh!
You're
cool.
For a treat.
Yeah,
it is available on Blu-ray.
This is the.
I've
finally been stumped. I've never seen Lucas, and but based on everything you guys have said, I will absolutely watch it as part of High School Week.
4 stars or 3.5 stars. Roger, I think I saw it because of Roger Ebert gave it such a
What did Gene
glowing
Siskel get it? I'm more interested in that.
I
more found myself aligned with Gene Siskel than Roger Ebert. Okay. Lucas for Monday, Daren Dochterman Tuesday.
Well, Steve, you mentioned the oeuvre of John Hughes. And,
the oeuvre.
Yes. That's what I said. That's what I said.
Oeuvre
All
de
right.
Jean Hughes.
All right.
Ouvre du
The oeuvre?
Hugus.
The films of John Hughes.
The egg of John Hughes.
The egg. Mork.
The ovaries of John Hughes.
John Hughes movies, especially the early ones, really related to me because I was in the same high school group that played against that high school that was in John Hughes movies. It had a different name. It was Maine East, but he calls it Shermer because it's on Shermer Road. But
so you're saying you went to school in the area where,
where
they were filmed and took place?
I was there. I was amongst it, and my pick for Tuesday is the ultimate realization, I think, of these ideas, which is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because it was shot during my senior year, and it happened in these, in this high school that I had been in, and we had visited it for speech team events and all that sort of thing, and they were in the same conference that the football teams played against and all that, but I could have cared less for any of that. But so it directly related to my memories of going to high school in that same area. So,
even though some bits of it were filmed in Los Angeles.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that, I mean, it takes place in a high school, but it's not about high school. It's about the act of becoming an adult. And I think that's what high school is for.
Although the high school scenes are some of the funniest stuff. I mean, Jeffrey Jones getting the call from Ferris, and of course Edie and Ben Stein teaching the 9 times, and so there's some just great high school stuff in that.
Absolutely, and they're iconic scenes. But all the students there look like they want to be somewhere else all the time.
They look like high school students.
Absolutely.
I'm sure they actually were high school students.
And it's so wonderful. I mean, Ferris Bueller is this amalgam of so many people that don't exist. He's the perfect guy who gets away with everything.
And he has Mia Sara as his girlfriend.
Oh my God!
Right.
He is the guy you wanted to be.
Sure.
So badly. He was so smart.
But you're
popular.
probably Alan Ruck.
Yeah.
I was Alan Ruck, but without a car of my own.
Yeah.
So
at least you've got a car.
Yeah, right.
Bom.
But it's just so great, and seeing Chicago in that time period really brings back memories for me specifically. But I mean, I never went in any parades or anything, but it just so represents that time in my life because there it is. And I love all the performances. I love all the secondary performances, even by like the valet car guy is so great. What country do you think this is? I mean, it's just so great.
Maitre d' at the restaurant.
Yeah, it's just so fun.
And Froman, the sausage king of Chicago.
But it's so many iconic, and it's not as real as the Breakfast Club is. But it's what we had hoped would be.
It's more aspirational.
It's very idealized.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why
it makes it kind of timeless in a way.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because I took my kids and my family to go see it recently over the summer. They did they do a lot of the outdoor screenings, and I was curious. We took them to see Ferris Bueller, and they loved it. They just thought it would, because of course you're so used to being told to follow the rules and do what's expected of you, to see this character who's just not going to follow any of the rules, and there's no repercussions. He gets away with everything.
Well, not
and
for
then
him.
At the end,
there's no repercussions for him.
Yeah, Jennifer Grey, covers for him, his sister, who has it out from the whole movie. There's that great scene where Charlie Sheen befriends her at the cop station, and then ultimately she vouches for Ferris at the very end.
Charlie Sheen playing himself.
But you see a little Home Alone with the Jeffrey Jones character, and it's funny because a lot of the other John Hughes movies are a lot more grounded. She's having a baby and Breakfast Club. This is a little larger than life. I mean, because it does become Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote.
It takes those ideas and brings it into a fantastical world.
When he's at the ball game and catches the foul ball, and Jeffrey Jones just misses
him on the TV,
television,
I also love the way that movie breaks the fourth wall. At the end when he turns to the audience and says, don't you have anything better to do? Why don't you go home? And it's like the first of those kind of, which are now sort of de rigueur. And even when he's talking to the audience throughout the movie, it's just great.
Yeah, right off the bat. It's like
the
3 ways
list
to get
of how to trick your parents
into saying you're sick.
It's great.
And it's got a great emotional story with Cameron too. The relationship with his father that is never seen on screen; it's only talked about.
Right.
But it is so. I mean, it's terrific.
Well, it's so cathartic for him to.
Yeah. I guess but I love the fact that the Ferrari gets wrecked at the end, and it's basically just it's the whole lesson of the movie summed up in that moment. I guess you're just going to have this conversation with your dad, man, that it's, you're still, in spite of all of the fantasy of what happened on that day, in spite of thinking that you can just make it all disappear by running the odometer back and all of that, there's still ultimately has to be this collision with reality. Right. But today, for this day, like, we've had this, and having this is what makes that collision with reality okay.
Right. We ate pancreas.
And I have to say, as great as Alan Ruck is in Ferris Bueller, he's that bad in Star Trek Generations. He's that dreadfully miscast as a starship captain in Generations.
Surely we can have one podcast without mentioning Star Trek. No, maybe
apparently
Too
not.
Late. Well, it's something to aspire for. By the way, we never talked about Touch of Evil when we did Gangster Week.
How is that related to Star Trek?
It's not. I'm just looking down at my notes. Okay, Ashley.
Okay, so look, man.
What part of the box are you in today?
Here's the thing. This is such a big box.
What's in the box?
It's Gwyneth Paltrow's head. That's where I am.
High school is such a fertile ground for movie storytelling. There are just dozens of terrific
I would not even know
movies.
where to be. I mean, you could go American Graffiti, but not going to go there.
Because none of us can relate to the 50s
not
at
at all.
Point,
no. Porky's, which, by the way,
Right.
completely underrated film
Well-
that has a reputation for being this sort of big sort of sex comedy, but it's a lot more than that. It's just a really fascinating film. And then on the wacky side, you could talk about stuff like Better Off Dead, right? I mean, I love all of those things. There's so many films that speak to me.
It's so interesting because the only thing people really remember about Porky's anymore is the shower scene because it's on the one sheet.
Right.
Them spying on the girls in the shower, which was sort of a staple of 80s cinema, and now has become sort of. It's interesting because obviously that was such a big part of 80s teen culture, and now looking at it through the lens of today, it's kind of offensive. It's kind
Yes.
of
You could say
But,
that.
but the movie wasn't just that.
Right.
What the movie really was just this whole. First of all, this whole meditation on again what it's like to be an adolescent, but it dealt with child abuse, like physical domestic abuse. It dealt with bigotry. All of those things were very present in that film that were generally dealt with in a very honest way. I mean, again, I love that movie. I could talk about it all day. But I think, I don't know that I could let this podcast and high school movies, at least the first one, because I'm sure we'll have more, could go by. Oh, by the way, Weird Science, love it. I could not let this podcast go by without bringing up a movie that I think is it sort of stands alone and it stands apart. We will never ever see its like again. I cannot imagine a studio ever greenlighting a movie like this ever again.
I can't wait to hear what this is.
It stars, one of my favorite young male leads from the 80s and 90s, Christian Slater, and also features the lovely and talented Winona Ryder in the absolutely goddamn amazing Heathers, which is this morality play. It's a Western. I mean, which even in a sense becomes explicit at the end when there's a new sheriff in town. And if you haven't seen Heathers, you just need to find it and you need to watch it because it's amazing. Michael Lehman directed it. It was a
Later
Dan
went on
Warner
to
script,
do Hudson Hawk,
which, by the way, I
ended his
also
career.
love, but it's a completely different kind of film. Very obviously a very different
Daniel
kind
Ward
of film.
is so amazing.
So amazing. It's such a great script. It is so witty. It is so unrelentingly dark, but it is never dour. It is never grim. And it is really about Winona Ryder, finding her power. At first she thinks she's going to find her power by being like one of the Heathers, one of the cool girls. And then she thinks she's going to find her power over the Heathers by, teaming up with JD, played by Christian Slater. But all of that stuff turns to shit until finally, by the end of this movie, she realizes that the only way to claim her own power is just to claim it. And she realizes, what she needs is cool guys like JD out of her life. And it ends. I mean, look, the movie would never get made today because of the violence in schools and like the third act with like setting the bomb and all. But it is so brilliant. And it's never dull, and it has something to say. Christian Slater is just absolutely great in this film. So is Winona Ryder.
He owned the 80s.
Totally did.
It's the politics of high school done so sharply and so, you just raise the stakes and everything. It's very real. It's exaggerated, but it's
right.
All the politics are very relatable.
And I should probably just sketch out what the hell the story was, which is at least what Christian Slater was playing. The idea is that Winona Ryder is one of those people we were talking about, kind of where we fit in the social strata. And Winona Ryder was someone who her character fit kind of almost nowhere and wanted to find a place. And just as she thinks her world is sort of starting to make sense, JD, Christian Slater, rides in, and he's like the cool kid. He's like the new kid who sort of comes to school, and he's not a part of anything, and he like wears a leather jacket, and he's awesome, and he brings a gigantic gun to school, and he has this amazing scene where he's telling off the bullies basically by sticking a gun in their face, which you could never do today. But essentially, JD convinces Winona Ryder's character after an accidental death that they can essentially change the landscape of the cultural politics at their high school by killing off the popular kids one by one. And Winona Ryder buys into it until she realizes that the game is sort of much deeper and much darker than she truly understands it to be, and that JD is quite obviously a psychopath who is incapable of loving her. And it's an awesome film.
Yeah, it's a great choice. It's a great choice. We've had some really interesting choices so far, and I think that the problem is there's still some of these legendary high school films we haven't even touched on.
Oh my God!
Like the Blackboard Jungle.
Well, yeah.
Which, of course, was sort of the seminal teen delinquency movie of the 50s with Glenn Ford. I don't personally love the Blackboard Jungle, but I thought it's worth mentioning. So we come to me on Thursday.
Well, there's an interesting distinction we could make. Are we talking about films, and I think we have so far, that largely take place in high school and are about the high school experience, or are they more about the teenage coming of age where high school isn't really a part of it?
Well, that will affect my pick because, I'm sort of wrestling because, again, there's an abundance of riches here.
Yeah.
I certainly thought about Cameron Crowe's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I love, and it's extremely literate. And what is nice is a lot of these movies, particularly John Hughes movies, have been through the lens of the male gaze, the male perspective. And what Fast Times did is it was as smart and incisive in dealing with sort of the female perspective, in the case of Jennifer Jason Leigh and their characters, as it is, through the male perspective. But I'm not going to pick Fast Times. As much as I love Sean Penn in that, obviously Phoebe Cates, Judge Reinhold, Ray Walston, commonly known as Henry Fonda to you, I do love Fast, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's directed by Amy Heckerling, female director who's just wonderful, and I do adore that movie, but it didn't have the kind of impact for me, and possibly because I didn't see it in a theater. I saw it on VHS for the first time, and I did toy, but I think it's a little too outside the box for us. It's one of my favorite recent movies, Rian Johnson's Brick.
Oh my
which
God,
is
so
a
good.
film noir set in high school. He made it for like 12 cents. Joseph Gordon-Levitt basically plays a Bogart-like detective who investigates the disappearance of an ex-girlfriend in high school. I can't say enough good things about this movie. It is a great film noir. It's a great neo-noir. It's a great high school movie. If you haven't seen it, I would say rush out and go see it. I adore Brick, but I feel like for a high school movie, we need to go with something more iconic. And for me, there's no more film that when I think of high school movies, it's funny. I don't think of Breakfast Club, even though it's great. Probably because I saw Breakfast Club in college. There's a high school movie I saw in high school that to this day I adore, and I just saw that it was a 6.8 on IMDb, which I don't think
6.8
gives it does justice to this film that I'm about to nominate. So for Thursday, my choice, and it's really far and away easily my choice, even though I've talked about all these.
Far
other
and
films.
away isn't a high school movie.
No, it's a movie about the
Although
Irish.
it did star the same actor. So I am nominating Tom Cruise in Risky
Legend.
Business.
There you go.
And
Love
I
that movie.
adore this movie. It's a fascinating movie because Paul Brickman did this film. It was his first film, and at the time it was for a high school movie. We're often dismissed by the critics. This was critically acclaimed.
There's always the Woody Allen connection with you.
And what?
There's a connection between Paul Brickman and Woody Allen.
No, you're thinking Marshall Brickman.
Yes.
Marshall.
You're right. Yeah, so there's no Woody
like
Allen connection.
Wow.
So
Ray Wise,
other than
Ray
the fact that they
Walston.
both have the same last name, Brickman.
Yeah.
But,
how many Brickmans do you know?
But
It's a terrible superhero.
he
name.
then went on and did a picture called. He did one other picture, Men Can't Leave, and then disappeared from the business. Really fascinating, kind of the Terrence Malick of high school movies. And I just think Risky Business is I mean, it was the height of 80s style. Again, rife with quotable dialogue throughout. It has the iconic scene of Tom Cruise dancing to Bob Seger in his living room when his parents go away, and his parents leave him alone and say, Joel, we'll be back in 2 days.
Harvard can use a man like Joel.
Yeah. And
Thank you. Good.
Marshall Brickman went there.
And he basically he basically is left alone and throws this enormous party. The house and he meets this woman played by the luminous Rebecca De Mornay, who is a lady of the evening, an escort, and then Guido the killer pimp played by Joey Pants.
Joey
comes
Pantoliano.
after them, and then he basically has to buy back everything that's been stolen from the house, and in the process manages to get into Princeton.
Well, he made $10,000.
And the late Richard Masur is so great as the
rep from
Princeton, who's come to interview him in the midst of this bacchanalian party. And it's this great twist at the end when you find out that Joel has gotten into Princeton. Princeton can use a man like you. And this is after, and then the mother finds the crack in the egg. To me, in high school, it just captures that kind of moment. Like, your parents are away, you're left at home alone. What are you going to do? And of course, he has this group of friends played by, Bronson Pinchot
and Curtis
Armstrong, who would later go on the Moonlighting in the 80s.
Fright Night.
And
he played Booger.
Why did I say that?
And
It's stupid.
It's another movie with a great scene of expensive car being wrecked. In Ferris Bueller, there's the dad's car. Once again, the car in this movie is completely destroyed. Who's the U-boat
commander?
Yeah. It's just like rife with quotable dialogue. Tom Cruise at his charismatic best. Rebecca De Mornay is fantastic and beautifully shot. A great font. I love the font in that movie, and of course,
the
wonderful,
was unbelievable.
a wonderful Tangerine Dream score,
which I listen to all the time.
Great music. So I love Risky Business, and that's my pick for Thursday.
I think that's an amazingly awesome
I think
pick.
it's good too.
I think 6.8 does not even begin to do it justice.
Well,
F
it just shows
IMDb.
It shows
People
the
are dumb.
ludicrousness of online.
Totally.
Here's my question, though. I've only seen that movie a couple of times, and I didn't see it until well into the 90s. I was a late comer to that party. Is he still in high school when the movie
Yes.
takes
Oh
place?
yeah,
Yes.
he
Okay.
just
He's a
applied
senior. Yeah.
to college,
Okay.
and he's stressing over that because
Joel
the whole thing
Goodson.
starts with him taking, this nightmare about having to take a test and not having studied at all. And I mean, it deals with all the fears of being in high school, which is being unprepared for tests, getting into a good college,
Right.
you're dealing with your parents and your friends. I mean, to me, it's like such a great epitome of the whole high school phobias and fears and the high school experience. I mean,
Apprehension about your future and
I know a lot of people when they think about high school movies that they immediately default to Breakfast Club. For me, I think of Risky Business. I really do.
I agree. I mean, it's funny because I think Risky Business is in many ways about the same thing that Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about. Because the lesson at the end of Risky Business is, indeed, sometimes you just got to say, what the fuck, right? I mean, that's that he's told at the beginning of the movie, and everything that he discovers and every bad thing that happens to him, happens because, he gets too wrapped around the axle about this thing or that thing. And it's not until he finally just says, what the
Because
that
he has
things
a
become
stick up
okay.
his ass.
That's right.
And this
He's
movie
terrified
really
of not succeeding.
validates the axiom, sometimes you have to say what the fuck.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely true.
And the funny thing is, it basically takes place in the same neighborhood that Ferris Bueller does.
Yeah,
They might have gone to school together.
It's like a high school cinematic
Yeah.
It's
universe.
basically, what if Alan Ruck became Matthew Broderick?
And
Alan Ruckman.
I have to
Alan
say,
Ruckman. Yeah.
much like Heather's, this is another movie you could not make today.
Yep.
There is no way you could have, a high school guy basically sets up a brothel in his own home and basically gets all his friends laid, and that's how he makes his money, and then strikes up a serious relationship with a call girl.
Who's
who's completely empowered and in command of her own,
and several years his senior.
and several years, and she's much older than him.
She would be a mugshot today.
Because he's not even of age. He's 17
He's
in that
17,
movie.
yeah.
So there's no way that movie gets made today. But it's.
I think what we're learning is that the teens are lame as shit.
Well,
You mean the
The
years.
80s were
Right.
awesome.
It's a fine line we live in because outrage culture can get too outraged. And the thing is, there's some very important things that are happening right now in the culture that are completely legitimate, and that we all need to be more aware of and more sensitive to, and I think that there's so much that is valid in what's going on with the social changes that are happening, but then there is also the people that do you disagree with me? Well, then it's which
And sometimes you just have to say, what the fuck?
yeah. And so it's a very fine line. And, people right now, it's gotten to the point where, if you disagree with me, then they're outraged and you can't have
And
a
you
debate.
should be silenced.
And you should be silenced. And that goes back to the Red Scare, and that goes back to Fixie, and that's very disturbing. But this decision, but then there's also so much that is completely valid and that
and
it's
long overdue.
and long
And I
overdue.
think that's why there's a lot of pent up anger and frustration that's coming out. That this stuff is finally, the dam has burst and things are changing. I think for a net positive, but.
And when you see you're not being respected as a gender or as a race or taken seriously, or time and time again, that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed in our society. And but then there are also things where certain kinds of art that shouldn't be. And it goes back to things like trying to on campuses where they're saying you can't show certain kinds of movies.
Right.
Or can't have certain kinds of comedians, whereas, basically, in my old alma mater, I guess there was a Lenny Bruce play, and there was outrage over, because he said things that aren't, particularly, acceptable in these times. But this idea that we shouldn't watch films like Intolerance or Birth of a Nation or Gone with the Wind, yes, we need to put these films in the context of the time they were made, but to treat it as though they didn't exist, offends my sensibilities not as somebody who loves history and is interested in politics and interested in movies. So I think it's a very fine line. We have to be very, very, very careful.
And on that note,
so that was Thursday. That was Thursday. It was a very big day, as it turns out.
So Friday.
What
are some of you want to say weird science? Huh? Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
No, actually, I don't want to say weird science. I'm kidding. I actually love weird science, but
I have a bunch of them here, but I'm just going to say my favorite. Let me just go down the list a little bit. Rushmore.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Rushmore.
Election.
I love it.
Which I felt was a big omission when we did Hail to the Chiefs Week.
I do too. I think we mentioned
just glossed
it a little
over
bit.
it. We mentioned it very briefly, but we didn't talk about it.
Well, because it doesn't have a president in it.
Yeah, but she's running for class president.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing, Mark. It's
well,
not
one day
the same
today's
thing.
class president could be tomorrow's president of the United States.
If you're not aware of this film, it's from 1992, directed by Alexander Payne, starring Matthew Broderick, and it's a terrific movie about a high school election.
Right.
And it's very funny.
Also with Matthew Broderick,
yes.
which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and Alexander Payne directed it, who's done some wonderful things like About Schmidt and
Downsizing.
The Descendants, and well, maybe not Downsizing.
And Jurassic Park 3.
He wrote that. He did not direct it. That was Joe Johnston. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Also, one other, young Sherlock Holmes.
Oh my God!
But
First Duty, the episode of Next Generation where Wesley's in Starfleet
Harry
Academy.
Potter.
Harry Potter is
oh,
high school.
Man. That's funny.
But my pick for to put forth for Friday is Say Anything.
Oh, great,
okay.
great
Cameron
choice.
Crowe.
Sure.
It takes place in their last year, and I think it has a lot of the the high school character tropes in it, but it's treated with a realism that I had never seen before, and it resonates a lot with me.
Well, I think it's a great choice. I was a huge Ione Skye fan in
Sure.
the 80s, and
So
still
say we
am. And, I loved her in the Rachel Papers and obviously in Say Anything. And, of course, John Mahoney. I think that's
Oh, my God, he's incredible in that movie.
yeah,
he is absolutely incredible.
And then, again, a film amazingly iconic, the boombox over his head that's been parodied ad infinitum. Terrific
and
movie.
The extremely underrated John Cusack, who is amazing in this and has an energy level that is unbelievable for this main character. He doesn't chew scenery, but he comes close.
Well, it's funny. You look at who were the big '80s teen stars. It was like Christian Slater and Anthony Michael Hall, and the other big teen, John Cusack, was known for his high school.
I love John Cusack. I could watch him. I mean, because by that logic, Grosse Point Blank is really high school reunion kind of, but it's about kind of it's really playing on our love of John Cusack and these high school movies.
That's my pick.
That's a great pick. My pick would be Fame.
I'm gonna live
I was
forever.
thinking of that too, but yeah.
Set at the, it's a very smart film directed by Alan Parker. Set in New York's High School of Performing Arts, about struggling high school students who want to make it in. It's dark and very edgy, and probably a very different high school experience than we all had.
Right.
But it's a wonderful film and inspired the TV series, which was also quite good.
And its soundtrack was constantly played on the buses going to speech tournaments during my high school years, so I couldn't get away from it. It lived in my high school years.
Yeah.
I remember visiting Disneyland once in the 80s and waiting in line at a Big Thunder Railroad, and some of the cast of Fame got into the car ahead of us. Like, oh my God, they're there.
Yeah, Debbie Allen is terrific in it. All the people who play teachers in that movie. I watched it in a long time. Actually, I should watch that again.
And it led to a really good show, which, by the way, Ira Bear was a writer on it.
Yeah, I know.
Bear, who was on
What
Star
I
Trek
love
Deep Space
about
Nine.
that is, after it was on NBC, they did it first run syndication for a few years. So I think in its final season, they actually did a post-apocalyptic episode of Fame.
What?
Where it was because they could basically do anything. And Ira Bear wrote the post-apocalyptic episode of Fame. I think it took it was a dream sequence or something, but it took place after the apocalypse and Fame, the high school.
And it turns out they all did live forever.
Other times I would revisit Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Sure.
We didn't talk about the Breakfast Club at
The
all.
Breakfast Club
Well,
is
Well, we did a
iconic.
little bit,
Yeah.
but I think it's too obvious to put in it.
For me, a more recent entry, kind of in the high school movie sweepstakes, that actually spoke to me quite a lot. As I felt like I understood what it was like to be these guys, and whereas perhaps Say Anything was sort of a realistic look at being in high school. This is sort of a naturalistic look at being in high school, or even sort of a naturalistic look at risky business. Super bad. Greg Mottola directed this. It's Jonah Hill. It's Michael Cera. It's like those kids feel like real kids.
Yeah.
The way that they deal with.
Christopher Mintz-Plasse.
Oh, he's so good. I mean, it all sort of feels like, even though it's heightened, it all feels like things that could happen and did happen. And for me, like the Jonah Hill and Michael Cera relationship felt like my relationship with like my best friend in high school, because we were just that stupid. If you ever want to see a movie that's about the stupidity of being in high school, Superbad is your film.
Yeah. No, Superbad's a great choice, and I'm sure the younger, a more recent iteration of the high school experience.
Right.
So that's a
To me,
really good choice.
I'm going to sound like the old guy with
Get
kids
off
on
my
his
lawn.
front lawn, but to me that marked a delineation between good movies and bad movies.
I love Superbad. I would throw out, I mentioned Brick, but also Tim Hunter's The River's Edge with
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Ione
sure,
Skye
sure.
and Keanu Reeves, when they find a dead body along the river and have to decide.
Well, speaking of that, Mark, I'm shocked that you didn't mention Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me.
Wow, Steve, how
right.
interesting.
I thought you were going to go out the Keanu Reeves and say Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I was going to say that for time travel.
Oh, well, okay, cool.
There was a couple of older films that maybe we should mention. Rebel Without a Cause.
Oh, that's a great
The
idea.
Last Picture Show.
right.
Although I think of both of those as more about sort of teenage alienation rather
Right.
than high
That's
school
Teenage
experience.
Alienation Week, absolutely.
Dead Poet Society.
Absolutely.
Clueless.
See, I think
Yeah.
Grease.
Grease,
Grease
Grease
is the
is
word.
right.
And I'll tell
And
you, that was the first
those of
movie
us that
I
I
ever
love.
saw about the high school experience. I was 10 years old when it came out, and it scared the hell out of me. Because
I don't ever want to go to high school.
Oh my God! I thought I'm going to be in high school in like 4 years,
and
or
everybody's going to break into song.
they're going to eat me alive. I mean, the
or they'll
hoodlums
be
were so
hopelessly
scary.
devoted to you.
Yeah, it was like that was to a kid that was scary to think that's what high school is going to be. I mean,
It
the
didn't
actors
scare
are
me
all in their
because
20s.
because the actors
all
were all
grown-ups.
look
But
incredibly.
I'm like, am I going to?
all
Is
high
that what
school
it's going to
students
be
look
like?
They all
like
looked like
adults.
they were in grumpy old men and
Yeah.
they were in Grease. I think Grease is a fantastic suggestion, and I always remember because playing the same theater Star Trek The Motion Picture opened in, and it had that great animated credit sequence that I always liked to the Frankie Valli song. But I almost
Mean
feel
Girls?
if ever a week called for an after-school special, because
Safe at any speed.
it's such a the after-school specials often dealt with the high school
angst.
angst.
Yes.
That this would be the week of the high school special.
The
But maybe that's
Outsiders, Stand and Deliver,
I love
American
Grease.
Pie,
Class of '84.
3 O'clock High.
Yeah.
I still love Grease.
I'm kind of with you.
Grease is good.
Grease is the
And
word,
it
man.
takes place over an entire school year.
Yeah.
It's
And it had John Travolta of Welcome Back, Kotter fame, the ultimate high school
No
TV
one
show.
remembers what Welcome Back, Kotter was.
I
I
remember.
do. It took place in Brooklyn.
Oh, Mr. Cutter! Mr. Cutter!
I've got a
See?
note. If you can't be
From Epstein's mother.
Right?
if you can't be an athlete, be an athletic supporter.
Yeah.
Up your nose with
Yeah,
the
you're-
rubber hose.
Yeah, I hear your mom was rotten to the core, but great to the infantry.
Next week. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Next week on Welcome Back, Kotter Week.
Yes.
No, we're
Gabe
doing a whole
Kaplan week.
podcast. We're going to have 3 listeners.
Oh my goodness.
Gabe Kaplan.
The Welcome Back
Gabe
podcast.
Kaplan is not dead.
He
Gabe
isn't dead?
Kaplan,
No.
Gabe Kaplan is
Very
left
much
the business
an angry.
and is apparently a huge professional gambler.
Professional gambler. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'll tell you, I had a crush on
Marcia Strassman.
wife.
She's so your kind of girl.
Oh my God, she was gorgeous.
Yeah, all the girls you dated since I know you, Marcia Strassman. Yeah, so I can totally see that.
I'm not going to tell stories about Marcia Strassman from the sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Was she not nice?
I'm not going to say.
Damn it.
She's a very lovely woman.
Okay.
She was.
Wow.
Okay, then.
Well, that's depressing. Okay. Grease. I think Grease
Sure,
says
I'll go along with you.
word that
That's
you
fine.
heard.
This is that word.
because
Caffeine.
Summer
That you
Lovin'
heard.
got you so bad.
Summer lovin'.
The dirtiest movie for kids you've ever
Oh my God!
seen.
The fact that that's a PG movie.
And you know, it's interesting because
I'm sorry, Logan's Run.
it was directed by Randall Kleiser, who also directed the sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
and also went to USC.
yes,
Yes.
that's correct. And was George Lucas's roommate.
Yes.
So, there
So
you go.
many interesting fun facts on the show. I can't keep up. Who needs IMDb when you have us?
We do.
I care.
Sometimes.
You know what? I got to Warren Stevens before I even had a chance to look up on it on IMDb. So there.
Maybe we all get to Warren Stevens before we hit IMDb.
Well, look. So Monday, Steve.
Lucas.
Tuesday,
Tuesday is Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Wednesday,
Heathers.
Thursday is Risky Business, and Friday is
Grease is the
Grease.
word.
Grease.
This is a great week. You cannot go wrong watching
a little of
like,
everything.
anything. Yeah, this is awesome.
And also throw in American Graffiti if you get a chance.
Yeah.
And the
Holy
Blackboard
shit. And then
Jungle.
Masters.
And Brett.
And all of them.
And Fast
All
Times
of
at
them.
Ridgemont
And everything we name. We'll have another high school.
And
week.
And Zapped. No.
We'll have we should have done like
The
9th
Karate
grade
Kid.
week,
All that.
10th grade week, 11th.
Yeah, we'll break it down by
Yeah.
grade. There you go.
Nice.
Well, listen, this has been the 430 Movie, and we hope you'll visit our website at 430movie.com, where you can purchase fantastic 430 Movie swag. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 430 Movie Podcast, or on YouTube at the 430 Movie. Also, don't forget to check out our new podcast, Inglorious Treksperts, the ultimate look inside Star Trek with some of your very favorite 430 Movie hosts and special guests from across the sci-fi universe. If you liked what you heard, please rate us 5 stars at Apple Podcasts. If not, don't, particularly if you hated my speech about
Anything.
the state of the social justice in the world right now. Probably
I'm not
went
gonna
off
rate us.
topic a little bit. So on behalf of myself, Daren Dochterman, Steve Melching, and Ashley Miller, we'd like to thank Bill Ritter and everyone here at the Electric Search Network for making our show possible. And we'll see you next week for an all-new theme week on the 430 Movie.
Class dismissed.
Bueller.
9 times.
This episode is brought to you by NCOM. Live your life on the grid with the makers of Space Paranoids.